Okay, so this is part two of what I think will be three parts of just letting you know some of the tricks that I use to try to make online classes engaging. And the next piece was what about the content, in an online class? And in my mind, I decided that, there's what we do in terms of presenting, let's say, theory and hard content. That may be a particular theorist you're presenting. It may be a psychotherapeutic technique that you're presenting. So there's sort of a hard content that oftentimes has readings that go with it, articles, sometimes videos. But there's the hard content, and then there's portions of my class, because really I was using my experience, portions of my class that had the application or the practice or the discussion of the content, the hard content that was just presented. So I started thinking, well, how could I do that online? How could I get hard content and somehow a discussion / application of the material that I just presented? So I realized that each week there needed to be two different kinds of what I call learning activities. That there had to be a learning activity, which I called assignments, and used the assignments section on Sakai when that came about. The learning section, which involved reading materials or watching videos and having folks demonstrate to me that they had read that material by asking questions, hopefully not questions that they could simply look up, on a particular page. Not typically not one-word questions with one-word answers, but but nonetheless, the questions that were designed to show that they had gone into the material and they had done some investigation and study of the material that was assigned. So those were called assignments. And the second weekly activity, and these were every week, was called a discussion forum or a conversation forum. On Sakai, the terms changed. So, conversation forum. In the conversation forum, it wasn't so much about the hard material that they had studied and demonstrated their understanding of in the assignment portion. And this portion, again, was called the forum or conversation forum. But this was like issues around the material that was just presented. So this was using the conversation forum format. This is where I would ask a question that hopefully was stimulating enough that it would get folks having different opinions, somewhat debating or supporting their opinions, I guess is a better way of saying it, and get a conversation going online. So one mistake I made, I told you I made the major mistake, is when I started in every week, I had the second thing I had were these assignments on the hard content and conversations. Now, what I did is I thought, well, just made sense to me that students should study the material, do the assignments first. So for the first half of the week, the assignments opened at the beginning of the week. I tended to open, the beginning of the week to me was a Sunday. So people also had weekend time. That's an important piece. That I would open the assignments on Sunday, and then they would close. I think it was probably Wednesday, and then the conversations would open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And so the week was split in half. And what happened is that consistently over the years, I didn't get a lot of complaints, but I got enough to say that this was, it was too much, that I divided it. It was too short a time, given folks' other responsibilities and commitments. And so after several years, I bought that, And so what I did is I opened up the assignments and conversations, both, because I realized really it was designed to read the assignments first. So I simply encouraged people to do that. But the conversations were all also open at the beginning of the week. So I'm not sure you can see me if I go to this side, but that's okay for a second here. So assignments and conversations would open Sunday at 8 a.m. and they stay open the entire week and close the following Sunday at 8 p.m. So what I'm saying is that the assignments and conversation, the learning activities, were open for a full 7.5 days. Not only were they open during that time, but if one opened here on Sunday at 8 a.m., they also had, if they said, well, I just can't work during the week, I have to do it on the weekend. This was an adjustment to complaints about, well, I can't do it this day, I have to do it that day. I needed to come up with something that worked for everyone. And this schedule, I've had virtually no complaints at all. And I don't take late assignments, barring a medical emergency. So that's not, that I just don't do that. So in this way, they had a whole weekend day, Sunday for an assignment, and then they had the next weekend, Saturday all day, and then Sunday until 8 o'clock. So there was lots of weekend time to do the assignment and the conversation. And I expected substantive responses on both of these, on the assignments and the conversations. So I didn't lower the standards, but I kept them open a long time. So that meant that, say, week 1 is this, and then week 2, same thing. So while week 1 was still open till 8 o'clock, on that day, week 2 would open at 8 a.m. But as it turned out, interestingly, not surprisingly to me, I'd say about half of any class would actually get started sometime before the final weekend. And at least half the class would do the work on that last Saturday and Sunday. But this way they had more time. So that's the second part, is these assignments and conversations. Now, just as a quick example, so this is a class in psychopathology, and so one area that many students are interested in are personality disorders. And the textbook I'm using, or the main book I'm using, is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's 1,000 pages. So I would often clump the content that made sense to be fit in the same week together. So for example, when I did personality disorders, I also did dissociative disorders, because dissociative disorders, as most of you know, pardon my inarticulate way of saying it, are sort of fragmentations of personality or attention or concentration or memory, but they are related, most of them, to having an intact and consistent personality, whereas dissociative disorders have usually ways that the personality process is broken, or perhaps multiple. For dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder. So the readings and the assignment was on personality disorders and dissociative disorders, readings, possibly an article, possibly a video that I made. And then the conversation, I brought in a guest, and we had a debate whether multiple personality disorder, DID, dissociative identity, was overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, because it seems to be a debate that has persisted in the 40 years that I've worked in this field. Some folks are true believers that DID is underdiagnosed, and others say, well, I've never seen a client with multiple personality disorder, and so I just think it's a Hollywood fabrication. Point is, there's really interesting clinical arguments for why the non-believer is missing it, and or why the believer is overdiagnosing it. So the conversation would be having a debate with somebody on the subject, just the two of us, an expert who initially was a true believer, and I took the role of the skeptic about the existence. Eventually, I lost my true believer, so I knew all the arguments from him, and so my partner in class is Louise, played the true skeptic, which she sort of is, after seeing 3,000 clients, and only seeing one client that she thought might have alters, multiplicity. Anyhow, the discussion then was about, that debate, and basically what they thought about it, who they thought had the more compelling ideas, et cetera, et cetera. So that gives you an example of how I tie in like the assignments were actually questions on definitions of matching various personality disorders with situations that can arise in their lives would be common for that disorder, and some material on dissociative disorders. But then this was like the conversations were always my attempt to create an interesting discussion. That's done, of course, on paper. Both these things are open, again, all week, Sunday 8 a.m. to the following Sunday at 8 p.m. And, the clients really can't that easily do the conversation without having, at least scan the material in the assignments. And so the idea is that these two things, will go together, and hopefully they'll have read the assignments before they engage in the conversation. But if they don't, I let that go and let them both be open at the same time. So that's the second, trick I use that I think students find interesting. And so I'm going to stop it again, and then I'll have a final third part. I hope this is interesting, because again, I'm just letting it roll.